Hello, everyone, and welcome. If you are an Iowa artist or filmmaker or historian or cultural leader, or you care about any of those things, you are in the right place. We will move this webinar quickly and finish at noon. So here's how it's going to work. My name is Michael Moraine. I work for the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs, and we have a panel who's going to help talk about some of the resources that are available now to help us all adapt to this strange situation with coronavirus and its ripple effects. So we have Kramer from the Department of Cultural Affairs, as well as Susan Claver from the State Historical Society of Iowa, David Schmitz from the Iowa Arts Council. We have Ryan West from Iowa Workforce Development and Dave Caris from Community Bankers of Iowa, as well as Sally Dix from Bravo Greater Des Moines. So a lot of experts, a lot of information. We will move through this quickly. If you have any questions about content, if you are on a screen, if you're using a laptop or a phone, there should be a little box, a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. That's where you can type in your questions and they will funnel privately to our team who is monitoring them and will make sure that the panelists see them. Obviously, we have almost 500 people joining. We might not be able to get through all of the questions, but we will do our best and we will follow up after this with specific questions. We will also email you a recording of this webinar. So if you have any questions, you can access that later. We will also post that to our website at iowaculture.gov. And of course, if you have any follow-up questions, there will be information about how to contact our staff there. So that's enough preamble. We'll get to this, but again, if you have any tech questions, any content questions, look for that Q&A box. So here is Kramer, the director of the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs.
Thank you, Michael, and good morning, everyone. This sure has been a trying last couple of weeks, and I just want to thank you all for all you're doing. Governor Reynolds has been giving her daily press conferences to really guide Iowans and provide a lot of information. And, you know, we haven't been through anything like this before. So we're all navigating it together. And what we're here to do today is to connect with you further and talk more about how we can be supportive to the arts and cultural sector of our population here in Iowa. So you've heard, even on Monday of this week, Governor Reynolds proclaimed Monday that there were going to be additional closures effective through April 30th for museums, libraries, aquariums, and zoos, in addition to an extension of the theaters, which were all added to the list of businesses ordered to close. However, many of you have been closed for several weeks and you've already been experiencing a lot of the stress that goes along with that. And so what we're here to do today is to help curate some of the resources for you in the arts and cultural sector of our population. We've heard a lot about how everyone has been affected, our public healthcare workers, our food chain and all the restaurants, our hospitality industry, and certainly our partners with tourism and cultural tourism have all been affected. But in Iowa, the arts and cultural sector is more than a $4 billion industry. In fact, 25,000 Iowans work directly in 5,000 arts and cultural businesses. These are small businesses and nonprofits. And when you expand that to include innovation and design, that number grows to more than 72,000 Iowans. And cultural tourism is such an important aspect of our state's tourism. In the next week or so, you should also look for a survey from Travel Iowa. We're going to be bringing you a lot of different information today. And so I just wanted to give you just a summary. First of all, we're going to hear from a couple of our staff, David Schmitz, who just started a week ago, and it's been quite a first week. So David, welcome as the administrator of the Iowa Arts Council. And I know from working with you day and night for the last couple of weeks that you are absolutely committed to the arts sector in our state. Also, Susan Claver, the administrator for the State Historical Society of Iowa. And as we try and navigate how to operate our organizations, we want to connect you with the most important and relevant resources. Ryan West is the Deputy Director for Iowa Workforce Development. And I hope you can convey to Director Beth Townsend and your entire team our gratitude for working literally around the clock for Iowans and to connect them with all of the unemployment benefits that are becoming available for a lot of folks who are now out of work. We're also going to hear from Dave Caris, the CEO from our Community Bankers of Iowa organization, and to talk more about how you can connect with your local financial institutions. There are benefits in the CARES Act that will allow for funding from financial institutions, including bankers, our community banks, our credit unions across the state. And then we're also going to learn or hear from one of our collaborators, Sally Dix, the executive director from Bravo Greater Des Moines. And we have local arts organizations all across the state. And just a message from Sally to hear more about what's going on in our area. So a couple more things about the CARES Act. And today, why we're focusing on that is that there are several other incentives that have become available, but really the most important and the most broad benefits are available through the CARES Act. If you've been following along, you know that there were 2 bills passed at the federal level just weeks ago. And the third bill, which is called the CARES Act, really addresses some things that are going to help a lot of you. And that's what we want to focus on today, is what's available for you. A couple of things with regard to businesses. First of all, there's an eligibility provision that allows for nonprofits. Our 501c3 organizations are going to be eligible through the small business programs. You'll be able to find a lot of that information on the Iowa Economic Development Authority's website, and they've put together some really great summaries. But today we're going to talk and really focus on the ones that have the greatest impact for most of you. And the first one is the Paycheck Protection Program. And this is actually a really great program that can help a lot of our Iowan workers stay employed throughout at small businesses and nonprofits. And this program has been just unveiling, and Dave Karras is going to be talking a little bit more about that. But what's really great about this is that there are 100% federally guaranteed loans to small businesses through December 31st, 2020. And what's really great is that throughout the eligibility, and you'll learn more about this, is that the majority of these loans are going to be fully forgiven when they're used for payroll costs, interest on mortgages, rent, and utilities. Second is the Small Business Association Emergency Economic Impact Disaster Loan Grants. And these are helping to provide a bridge and funding and an immediate advance up to $10,000. Again, you'll hear more about those in a moment. And then SBA disaster assistant loans. There are other programs available. You're going to hear more information from other partners, Department of Revenue, and others, but this is where, again, we just really wanted to focus our discussion today because it has the most impact for each and every one of you. I also just want to mention another aspect in the CARES Act, and that was with regard to federal funding for arts and cultural organizations. And this is an addition or a special appropriation at the federal level. So this is in addition to our normal appropriations to the National Endowment for the Arts, $75 million, also to the National Endowment for the Humanities at $75 million. There were also appropriations made to public broadcasting and also to the Institute for Museum and Library Services organization at the federal level. And so you should be looking for those if they're applicable to you, the various grant programs that are coming out. But specifically, literally just this morning, we learned that through our partnership with the National Endowment for the Arts, that the state of Iowa, through our 40% amount that was appropriated, will be receiving $442,700 to distribute in the form of operating support grants to arts organizations. This amount represents our state's share of the 40% of that National Endowment for the Arts appropriation. The additional 60% is going to be also granted out. And so the National Endowment for the Arts also literally just released this morning through its CARES Act funding guidelines for direct grants. So more information will come on each of those, and we will be working also to convey any information with regard to the National Endowment for Humanities funds that become available. They also would receive 40% at the state level and then 60% at the federal level. While each one of these pies is helping to build up the entire amount of support that we hope that you can be connected to and take advantage of during this very challenging situation, so that you can make it through and get over the hump, so to speak, to where we hopefully will get to a point where we'll be operating and get back to normal. We don't know when that's going to be, however. And so what we'd like to do is make sure that, that you are connected with all the available resources. So the best way to do that is to sign up for our newsletters, and we are going to be sending you information as soon as it becomes available. Throughout this call, you're going to hear more about what grants are available to you now, and then we will be updating that in the coming weeks. So now I'd like to turn it over to Susan Claver, the administrator of the State Historical Society of Iowa. Susan?
Thank you, Chris, and hello, fellow cultural colleagues and friends. I hope you are all well and healthy during this time. The State Historical Society's fiscal year 21 Historical Resource Development Program annual grants deadline has now been extended, and they are all due June 1st. These grants include museum, documentary, historic preservation, and country schools categories. All grant guidelines, criteria, and requirements for this grant program remain the same and can be found on the DCA's website. If your organization has a current Historical Resource Development Program grant for a project with completion deadline of December 31st, 2020, and you think you may need an extension, please contact the Historical Society's grants manager, Kristen Vandermolen, directly. Kristen remains the point of contact for any questions regarding these grants, as well as field services requests for fiscal year 21. Also, the Department of Cultural Affairs and State Historic Preservation's Office Preserve Iowa Summit, our annual professional development conference, scheduled for June 4th through 6th in Dubuque, will now be a virtual conference on those same dates, and additional details will be shared soon. In addition to grant and funding resources being shared during this webinar, there are a variety of other resources available during this time from the Department of Cultural Affairs, as well as national organizations, including the American Alliance of Museums, American Association for State and Local History, Americans for the Arts, and Institute of Museum and Library Services. Links to these resources can be found at iowaculture.gov and can help you and your staff work through topics, including how to care for and manage your collections during this time, how to engage your audiences virtually through educational offerings, online exhibits, performances, and other connection points, which many of you are already doing and doing quite well, and how to ensure continuity of operations and continued preparedness planning and training. In addition, the State Historical Society, through its Local History Network program, and the Iowa Arts Council both have digital toolkits spanning a variety of topics to help you and your organizations during this time and into the future. These toolkits are also found on DCA's website. And lastly, our staff of experts here at the Historical Society are here to help you during this time. And although we are working remotely, we remain connected via phone and email to answer your questions and provide assistance. Now I'll turn it over to my Iowa Arts Council colleague, David Schmitz.
Well, good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Iowa Arts Council staff and our statewide advisory board, I'm very glad to be with you all today and during this really challenging period for all of us. The Iowa Arts Council has existed for more than 50 years to support the arts in good times and perhaps more importantly in hard times. As your state arts agency, we are committed to making sure that Iowa remains a place where artists and the arts thrive, and where everyone feels included in the arts and has access to them where they live. We have a lot to get to today, so I'll get right to our granting updates. First of all, for our FY20 grant agreements, and that would be for the year beginning July 1st, 2019 and ending this June, we understand that circumstances have changed a lot and that may impact your ability to complete your activities as originally proposed. We've heard from a lot of you already that your project activities are substantially complete, but for those with activities that were scheduled to take place this spring, we'd ask that you consider other ways to fulfill the intent of your project, even if that looks a little bit different. So for example, we're asking applicants to encourage new forms of public or online engagement during this public health emergency. And if that's something that's not possible, we'd ask you to get in touch with our grant specialists, whose names will be featured on the next slide. Secondly, as far as the FY21 grants, and that would be for activity beginning July 1st of this year and extending through June 30th of next year, we'd like to share some updates related to the programs that you're seeing on your screen. In an effort to be responsive to the needs that we're hearing right now, we're making a couple of adjustments right away. One is that the application deadline for these programs will be extended from May 1 to June 1 to give you more time to prepare your applications. And as always, I would encourage you to be in touch with our team as you're preparing your applications with questions. Secondly, we are waiving cash match requirements and replacing those with an in-kind match requirement of 50%. So hopefully that will help you, as I know many resources right now are very scarce. Notification about funding decisions will remain the same by July 1st of 2020. Third, we're very pleased today to be able to share the formation of a new Iowa Arts and Culture Emergency Relief Fund. Grants awarded through the Iowa Arts and Culture Emergency Relief Fund are intended to support those most impacted and vulnerable in the Iowa arts and culture community by serving as a bridge between financial loss and other forms of state and public assistance. During this first funding round, we're using survey data from the Americans for the Arts Impact Survey that many of you took, so thank you, and other sources, and we've identified two particularly hard-hit areas of our arts community. One, artists and contract workers who are engaged in producing art, in doing arts and cultural events. We know you're facing an almost unprecedented loss of income due to widespread cancellations of events, residencies, production contracts, etc. And secondly, we know that for our nonprofits, particularly those who are dependent on earned income or revenue from admissions and ticket sales, we know that you've been particularly hard hit as well. And so while through the relief fund and the initial funds that have been provided to it, we cannot take care of all those needs, and certainly not at the level that's commensurate with the nature of the loss. What we can do is provide some grants to really be a bridge and an aid to you in accessing other forms of assistance. So we are going to be making grants of $1,000 for individual artists and eligible arts workers, as well as $2,500 for our nonprofits, starting first with some of our smaller organizations. This is in addition to the CARES Act appropriation that Director Cramer just mentioned a short time ago, and the grant dollars from our federal partner, the National Endowment for the Arts. And so we hope that across that spectrum, that there will be relevant and timely public funding opportunities, whether you're an individual artist or an organization of any operating support size. Program guidelines for the Emergency Relief Fund will be posted on iowaculture.gov and the Arts Council's website by Monday, April 13th, with a deadline of next Friday, April 17th. Please look for more information in our upcoming newsletter, as well as in the Department of Cultural Affairs Friday update, and of course on social media. Finally, in keeping with Susan Claver's update about the Preserve Iowa Summit, the Iowa Arts Council has also made a decision to to keep its August 7th date for our statewide conference, but to move it to a virtual event. So look for more details about that August 7th summit. And one more thing, the AFTA Impact Survey. If you haven't taken that, and I want to thank the more than 200 organizations and 60 plus artists counting who have taken that, I would really encourage you to do so. The data and stories collected through this survey forms an important baseline that we can share with elected officials, as well as the public to tell the story of how this crisis is impacting our industry. So with that, I will now turn it back over to Director Chris Kramer.
Thank you, David. And again, I think you heard Susan and David are representative of our entire staff who are really here to help serve you during this time with your regular projects and certainly with any of the urgent projects that you have going on. We can't thank everybody enough, and really it's about collaboration, and that's how we're able to continue to serve everybody during this time and also connecting. And so right now, I'd really like to introduce a great partner in an advocate for arts and culture, and that's Sally Dix, the Executive Director from Bravo Greater Des Moines. Sally?
Thank you, Director Kramer, and thank you to your entire leadership team. The Department of Cultural Affairs and the Iowa Arts Council has been working an awful lot to make sure that arts and culture stay at the forefront of these conversations at this time. And really, I just want to, on behalf of all the local arts agencies and regional arts agencies working to support arts and culture around the state, I just want to thank everybody on the call for what you're doing. Making art, especially now, is something we can do to cultivate hope and celebrate community. And right now, everyone needs this connection more than ever. I know that there's a lot of talk about essential services and essential needs right now as we respond to COVID-19, and that's as it should be. But it's also critical to understand and acknowledge that the arts have been hit awfully hard too. And the arts and culture, as Chris stated, in our state are critically important from an economic development standpoint, but it's also going to bring the innovation and resiliency that our communities are going to need. Arts and culture will be the backbone of whatever recovery efforts come through. And I just want to say how much we value you locally in Greater Des Moines, across the state, working collaboratively together with our national partners to make sure that your voices are heard. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for what you're doing. And please hang in there.
Thank you, Sally. And it is important that our artists and creative sector really use the arts in a creative way to lead us through this whole situation. So thank you so much for that message. And just want to remind you that, you've heard a couple of calls to action. We definitely want you to keep up with the latest with the Iowa Cultural Coalition. You can sign up for emails from them. David mentioned participating in the AFTA survey. We are using that tool to gather information here in Iowa. So we are collaborating at the federal level, the state level, and at the local level to help recognize and gather data from what's going on here in Iowa. And that's really important because we've been able to share that data with our federal partners. Our congressional delegation has been working very hard on passing these incentive and relief legislative packages. And Senator Grassley's been at the helm of that as the chairman of the Finance Committee. We've been working with his team on trying to convey the importance to keep eligibility for nonprofits, for the gig economy, and for these care packets or CARES Act funding packages. I also just want to share one other recent development is that they are already talking about a fourth federal stimulus package, and they're already discussing infusing another $250 billion into our country's economy. So I think that you just need to make sure to rest assured that there are people that are looking out for you, your small businesses, you as individual workers, and also the nonprofit organizations. And so by participating in these surveys when we send them out, it's really to gather important information. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dave Caris, the CEO of Community Bankers of Iowa. Dave has agreed to join us today to provide an overview of the SBA lending programs most relevant to Iowa's arts, culture, and creative industries. Dave, it's over to you.
Great, thank you, Chris, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to try to explain in as simple a terms as possible how this Paycheck Protection Plan, which is part of the CARES Act, works and is currently working. First of all, it's important to understand this whole program was designed to allow small businesses to keep workers on the payroll during this time. And when workers are kept on the payroll for the qualifying period, then this loan is forgiven. So this is free money, assuming you keep people on the payroll. It was a very rocky start to this program, which began last Friday. The Small Business Administration is the one administering it, and during normal times, they just do a great job. They've got wonderful people, but they're not a large organization. They have, I think, nationally 800 employees is all. They've got about a half a dozen field directors in Iowa. And again, they're great people. They do a wonderful job, but they were never set up to do something of this magnitude. So it's been a rocky start, but the system is getting better each day for banks and for people applying for loans. And so, but you need to be patient with this program at the current time. The way this works is you need to either go to your bank or credit union to apply for one of these Paycheck Protection forgivable loans. But before you do that, you first probably need to call whatever bank or credit union you're used to working with and set up an appointment or find out how they are receiving these loan applications, because a lot of bank and credit union lobbies right now are closed and they're simply just using the drive up. But many of the banks by appointment are meeting with their customers to work through these loan applications. Again, the start date of this program was last Friday, April 3rd. Right now, they're authorized to continue this program, or the last day to apply for one of these Paycheck Protection loans is June 30. So there is plenty of time. So who can apply for one of these loans? Small businesses with fewer than 500 employees, self-employed persons can apply, independent contractors, sole proprietorships, and as Chris mentioned earlier, not-for-profit 501c3 organizations. The way it works is 75% of the proceeds you would get from these loans must be used to cover payroll. And then the other 25% can be used for other purposes, such as group healthcare costs, mortgage interest payments, utilities, rent, and interest on debt. It's important to understand too, let's say you're a small business and you decided a couple of weeks ago you needed to lay off a bunch of your workforce. You can rehire them once you're approved for one of these loans, and then that will track through the 8-week period, and that will all be forgiven. So don't think it's only based on the employees you have today. You can apply for a loan, rehire folks, and get this money. You're going to have to provide a good faith certification that the current economic conditions make the loan necessary to support ongoing operations. And again, that's not a high bar given what's going on right now. Also, the way this loan is calculated, or the amount that you're eligible for, you take your average monthly payroll cost and multiply that by 2.5. You do have to exclude compensation in excess of $100,000 a year, and also per employee per year. And also the total loan maximum amount is $10 million, which I think would cover most folks on the phone. So forgiveness of these loans starts at the end of an 8-week period. And banks can start applying for that forgiveness, for that funding from the SBA after 7 weeks. But they're going to need the borrower to come up with some information in order to get these loans in the system and approved. And then at the end of that 8-week period, they're going to need more information from you, the borrower, in terms of, payroll records and that sort of thing. As was mentioned just a little bit ago, so right now, only $349 billion has been appropriated for this Paycheck Protection Plan from Congress. I was on a call with Senator Ernst yesterday, and she indicated that they are looking at adding another $250 billion just for this program. So, Chris, the additional aid may be in excess of $250 billion, but they are looking at another $250 billion going into this, and they plan to do that on this Thursday by a voice vote. So if they do that, that won't require Congress to come back to DC. They have a way to do this if no one objects, all on Thursday. So just let me review once again. If you're interested in applying for one of these loans, you need to get a hold of your bank or credit union, talk to them about how they're receiving these applications. You can go to the Small Business Administration website and download the application form. So you can begin to look at the types of information you'll need to pull together in terms of payroll records and things like that. And then you go to your bank, they put the loan, assuming they agree that you qualify, they put the loan into the system, and they have to wait several days for the SBA to approve that. And then the bank will end up putting all those funds in your account. And again, after an 8-week period, there will be a true up, and you're not obligated to pay any of the loan back, assuming you've met all of the criteria and provide the evidence that you kept workers on the payroll. So I think I'll stop there with the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. I also would mention there's a separate program out there called the EIDL program, which stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And I'm not as familiar with this program. It's been out there for quite a while, and SBA is used to working with this. But the most you can apply for under this EIDL loan is $10,000. And again, I think talk to your bank or credit union about that program. I know if you currently have an EIDL loan, it can be refinanced or rolled into this Paycheck Protection program. So, but there is some interplay with those two, but I'm not as familiar with that. I think I'll stop there, and I'd be happy to answer a couple questions right now, or if the moderators want to wait until the end to take all questions, I'm happy to do that as well.
Hi, Dave. This is Veronica. We did have a couple of questions come in about the Paycheck Protection Program.
Okay.
Can you address how that applies to employers who are looking to cover the costs for contractors and or new hires? And then also those who are just paying themselves. So they don't necessarily have any employees, but they've got a business in which they're paying themselves.
Right. So let me address the latter question first. I think that the key there would be if they're just self-employed and they pay themselves, they're going to have to show over a 12-month period, how much they've paid themselves. And I guess you would call that payroll. It can be a rolling 12-month period, or in 2019, a calendar period. They also, for seasonal type workers, they allow you to look at a certain season in making that. But I think it would all tie back to showing historical records of what you've paid yourself over a 12-month period, either calendar or rolling, and then that calculation could be made. And again, your banker can help you step through that. The other question had to do with payment to subcontractors or contractors. It's my understanding that those are not allowed to be included in this. In other words, I think whoever you hired as a contractor would have to go through this themselves. But I'm not 100% certain on that. But it's my understanding that this is just for your payroll, your own payroll or your organization's payroll. And then again, 25% of this amount can be used to pay rent, utilities, and that sort of thing. I hope that's helpful. I would also mention too, on the Small Business Administration's website, there's a really good Q&A section, and questions like these are oftentimes answered on their Q&A on their Q&A system.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think we will go ahead and move along to our next panelist then. But if you still have questions, please feel free to check out the website Dave mentioned, and otherwise we'll try to get to some of the more broad questions that apply to everyone at the end of today's presentation.
Okay.
Great. So thank you so much, Dave. And I think that is a really good transition into that's a good transition into our next speaker, Ryan West, Deputy Director for the Iowa Workforce Development. And we're so grateful that Ryan has agreed to join us today, because this has been a very busy time for their agency. And he's going to help discuss state and federal workforce resources that are most relevant to our industry. While these are available to everyone, I think today is our purpose is to just kind of see yourself in these programs and see which one is the best one that is suited for you and how to handle the unemployment portions of things. So Ryan, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Director, and thank you for having me on. Nice to meet everybody. Some of you may have heard some of our webinars before, so some of this may be a repeat, and if it is, I apologize. I apologize as well. My video, for whatever reason, is not working today, so I'll go ahead and get started. So there's a lot of moving pieces with the unemployment insurance part of it. There's a lot of information out there circulating that may or may not be right as well. So first and foremost, I really love to just you'll hear me reference this a lot, but we really are trying to push as many people as we can to our website, iowaworkforcedevelopment.gov. There are an abundance of things out there for you to really kind of figure out and find out what works best for you. And it's only growing. Moving forward, we're going to be adding some tabs specific to each program that was unveiled out of the CARES Act. So high level, the CARES Act bill was passed by Congress a few weeks ago, obviously. When that happens, then what has to happen for unemployment insurance purposes is that has to go through the Department of Labor for us to figure out how to administer it. Essentially, they put out the guidance, and then we have to figure out how to make it all work, as do all the states. Remember, unemployment insurance is a federally funded program. So we're one of those unique agencies who, although we are a state agency, we actually, for unemployment insurance purposes, get our funding through the Department of Labor. So it's a little bit unique. And so high level, I'm going to start with PUA, which I think probably is, and was stated in, again, the handout, probably will fit the category for most people on the call. But we're heavy into acronyms, so I apologize. PUA is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. So similar to DUA with a D, when a disaster happens in the state, such as a flood or a tornado, there's a proclamation called DUA. Essentially, the governor of the state has to declare a disaster, which goes to the president of the United States, and from there they will actually approve or deny it with the help of FEMA. And DUA has three forms. One of those forms is unemployment insurance. DUA was passed in the state for this pandemic. However, the unemployment insurance piece was not included. And I imagine that's because it was covered here under the PUA section, and in fact, in more of a broad state. So what PUA basically states is the program provides up to 39 weeks of unemployment benefits to individuals who are self-employed, independent contractors, nonprofit employees, and gig economy workers, as well as individuals working part-time or otherwise who would not qualify for regular benefits. So remember, under normal circumstances, an unemployment insurance claim is made up of what the wages have been that you've earned in the last 18 months. So it's strictly paid by the employer. A claimant can be compensated with the benefit beginning February 2nd, 2020, or the first week a claimant was unable to work due to the COVID-19. So yes, it's been defined as February 2nd. However, in the state, most of what we're seeing was mid-March. So it's essentially when the claim is filed because of the result of COVID-19, whichever date is later. That will run to the end of December, basically December 26, 2020. So essentially what that means is PUA is essentially set up for anybody who wouldn't qualify under normal unemployment insurance purposes. There's a really good link out on our website. If you go to iowaworkforcedevelopment.gov and you click on the COVID-19 tab, you scroll down, there's a tab called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance PUA. If you click on that, that will actually bring up what you need to qualify, what you have to submit. So you're going to have to submit proof of income, and we have that loaded down there. I think we have 2019 1099, 2019 W-2, 2019 pay stubs. So go out and take a look at that. I won't read it verbatim, obviously just in the interest of time, but it's really outlined on there and everything you need to do. I know when we go through these situations, just through experience from, I was here 10 years ago. I'm not comparing what we're going through now as a recession, but there are a lot of similarities and guidance that's coming down from the Department of Labor. And what we're able to do now when it comes to our website versus then is night and day in social media. So we really want to push people out there to really kind of read that guidance and find out where they fit. So that's really how PUA works. We've had a lot of claims filed already. If you file the claim, by claim I mean unemployment insurance claims, 2 or 3 weeks ago, or if you had staff that did and they were denied because of they weren't monetarily eligible, meaning they weren't qualified under the normal way. We are going back and those claims essentially are sitting in, for lack of a better term, a holding tank. And so we've run a query to send a letter out to those individuals, which I believe will go out this week or early next week. And that'll essentially tell them, hey, you may now be qualified for unemployment insurance. You shouldn't have to file a new claim. So just FYI on that's been a question that has come up quite a bit. The other part that has come up a lot is the FPUC. Again, I don't want to let anybody down and at least not have 5 acronyms in this presentation. FPUC is the Federal Pandemic Compensation, and that's the $600. And so if you're on PUA, so let's say you're going to qualify for PUA, let's just hypothetically say $400. Okay, it's all going to depend on each individual situation. Then on top of that, you would essentially get the $600 as well each week. And that would will run until the end of July. They've deemed that, I believe, for us, ending July 25th, us meaning all states. And so the window there is 2 or 3 months. And so that $600 is essentially coming to anybody who qualifies for unemployment insurance, whether on a regular claim or through PUA, or through our Trade Act program, which I won't go into too much detail on. If you're not on trade, then that's a whole kind of different set. But it also would qualify for people who are on short-term compensation. Now, short-term compensation in the state of Iowa is what we call our Voluntary Shared Work Program, or VSW. And I think that question that came in through Dave, that maybe there was some questions on that. And so what the VSW program is not, first of all, let me give you a little history on the VSW program. So I believe the state of Iowa has had that program since 1994. Not all states have it, okay? So I think 50% of the states. And one of the things what VSW is essentially set up for is these times, basically, and it basically what it, in layman's terms, is it allows employers to reduce layoffs by combining a little bit of an unemployment insurance payment with a normal work week salary, so or reduced salary. There are guidelines that qualify for it, and that again is all out on the website. You can go to iowaworkforcedevelopment.gov, click on that COVID-19 tab up on the top, and there's a great section under voluntary shared work, how you qualify for it, everything you need to know there, how to apply. So I really would like to encourage everybody to go there if you think that's something that's your area would be a good fit for, or you think you have questions on it. One of the benefits of that program is that came out, not only just how it's set up, but that came out through the guidance, is that program is actually going to be 100% paid for by the Department of Labor. So provides that states with an existing STC program, which Iowa has, as we call it VSW, so don't let that confuse you, may provide VSW benefits under agreement with the Secretary of Labor and reimbursed for one half of the cost. So basically provides the states with an existing program to get a maximum of 26 weeks, 100% paid. So it's a good program. It's obviously funded by the Department of Labor, and they've opened that up to do that because of the time we're in. So high level, that's where it's at. There's a lot more detail, a lot more understanding of it in that guidance. I don't have the exact number of employers that have applied for it. Before the recession hit, we had a very few employers on it. It just didn't make sense for the time we were in, and very few. I mean, there's almost 80,000 employers in the state of Iowa. I think we're just under, or actually we may just be over now. And it was less than 1%. So it's a good program. Those things are really the main things. One other thing, just in the interest of time, I will cover. There's also something out there called Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. Okay, and what this is essentially, this is an additional 13 weeks of unemployment insurance benefits after you've exhausted all that other stuff we just talked about, right? So we have this during the recession as well. Actually, there were several tiers of it. I won't go into that detail on that, obviously, to waste everybody's time. But what that would mean is you would draw out your regular claim or your PUA claim, which would be 26 weeks. In most cases, that's what people will qualify for. That's the max. Then you could get an additional 13 weeks. Hopefully, this is passed and we're back to work and we're able to do all these great things again in the States. So I don't want that one to confuse you. I had a little brief part on the Paycheck Protection Program, which I am certainly not an expert in, so I really thank Dave for covering that. And it was essentially just real high level. So high level, that's where we're at. The guidance is approved. There's more guidance coming out. Yeah, it was by the hour. Now we've slowed. Guidance that's coming out now is just more of the detail on how we put it together on this side. Luckily for us in the state, we have a lot of these programs that were in place, quite honestly, 10 years ago, so we can, lack of a better term, flip a switch or go back and review them to make this happen. So I don't want to hog any more time, Director. If there's anything else you'd like me to cover, I'm more than willing to, or questions, by all means.
Sounds good. So maybe while Veronica and David are preparing a couple of questions, I'll take a quick one on here. We've had a lot of questions. I'll take one that just talks about new employees. It sounds like some folks either maybe not having some of the folks that are currently working there able to rejoin because of age or not wanting to come back to work. And so can you address just how to address any new employees? And then we'll go back and have Veronica and David ask some of these more questions about individuals.
Sure. So are you referring to people not wanting to work because of the $600?
Yes, but maybe because of the situation, and
Yeah.
so a company has to bring new folks in. So how do they justify each one of those?
Yeah. So one of the things I didn't cover on here, which I should have. So thank you for bringing this up right off the bat, I guess. A lot of the guidance we received obviously was how to get people going and get paid. You know, really the basics of unemployment insurance is to keep the economy going during times of disaster. Really, in a nutshell, that's what it's designed for. But we've also been given guidance that, you know, we are not going to condone people who do not want to work to try to claim unemployment or get the $600. And we will address those accordingly, and we're asking employers to help us notify that. What we've been telling people on these webinars, employers specifically, or claimants, quite honestly, or claimants / employees, whatever you're more familiar with, is, you know, if you don't have a doctor's note saying that you can't work because of the COVID-19, then it's business as usual. And you should be at work, whether that's new employees, you know, obviously age is a concern, but if you don't have a doctor's note that says, fear's one thing, we get that. But if there's really no basis for a reason that you can't work, then we're telling employers that it should be business as usual and they should not be able to collect unemployment insurance.
Okay, thank you. And then Veronica, do you have a question?
Chris,
Well,
I'm gonna,
yeah, David and I are going to kind of go back and forth between a couple of these. So go ahead, David.
Okay.
I'm going to jump in with one quickly, Veronica, that I have heard come up frequently in our correspondence with grantees. Dave, this one might be better for you, and then I've got a quick one for Ryan. Dave, we know some nonprofits have already laid off employees. We believe that they would be eligible still for the PPP program as long as they bring those employees back on payroll by June 30th. Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, so if you've already laid off employees, you would need to bring them back when your loan's approved. So, you know, let's say next week you apply for one of these loans and you get approval. You could then bring them back right away. Because remember, it's an 8-week period they're going to look at. So your payroll would have to be at that old level for that 8-week period in order to have the loan forgiven.
Thank you for that, Dave. And then just quickly, Ryan, before we go back to the questions coming in here. Ryan, I know you spoke on the webinar that you did on Friday with the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines. You talked about with the expanded eligibility for independent contractors, freelancers, and gig workers, and that additional $600 that you spoke to. Number one, they have to go to the state unemployment office first, to you all, right? And secondly, you spoke to the fact that possibly some of them might get an initial denial letter just because traditionally they wouldn't be eligible, but that it was critical for them to continue to log their proof of income every single week. Can you just speak to that again really briefly?
Sure. So yeah, so we want everybody to go online to file their initial claim, and that's at iowaworkforcedevelopment.gov. Our Iowa Works offices, we have one in the Des Moines area. It's over on Army Post, 15 across the state. They are appointment only. Just, you know, and that was, we kind of extended that out as long as we could before we had to go that route, just because of obviously the virus and how many people we can be around. So yeah, so we want everybody who's in a position of filed and wasn't monetarily eligible to just keep track of what they're doing up until they get their claim approved. You know, sometimes we'll have folks who are in a situation where they don't monetarily qualify, but then they take another job and they earn some wages. So that's all we meant on that. I know it's confusing, and certainly we want to make sure that we are not penalizing people who are not sure, and we want to work with everybody to make sure that we're working through it to help them. We have so many people who are filing unemployment for the first time, and when that happens, there's kind of a heightened level of fear, rightfully so, because they just don't want to do it wrong, David. So I would suggest that yes, that should start taking care of itself though, because we're starting to reach out to those folks and let them know that they're going to be eligible otherwise. So.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome. And Dave, one other thing I wanted to say, just to piggyback on Dave's question, that question he had before, the guidance that we put out in our news release, our media release on Monday was, and this is in part to the $600. So at the bottom of our release, we had additionally, if your employer receives a loan under the Paycheck Protection Act and places you back on the payroll full-time, you will no longer be eligible for unemployment or FPUC benefits. Meaning, as an employee, if you're called back, your unemployment insurance should stop, and you should notify us to let us know that you're back. So, or not continue to call in your weekly claims. So I just wanted to clarify that on our site too. Meaning, if you're back to work, you shouldn't be on unemployment.
Okay, great. Well, we are almost at time today. So for those of you who didn't have questions answered, I will encourage you to take a look at those websites mentioned. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to Michael Moraine to wrap us up here.
Sure thing. Thank you all for your good questions, and thank you to the panelists for lending your expertise. We hate to keep saying check our website, but we are learning a lot of these details just as you are. So really, one of the best ways to find updates to help you navigate these resources is through our website, iowaculture.gov. There you can sign up for newsletters. We will plan to send an e-blast most Fridays with specific resources related to this whole strange situation. So check in there, and automatically, because you are participating in this webinar, we will send you a recording of this webinar as well as the slides with some information about how to keep in connection. Just this morning, we learned some additional information about new grants, brand new grants for individual artists. So we will pitch you that information and those details as soon as we learn it. So again, thank you all for your patience. Hang in there. We are rooting for you, and we are here to help you through this difficult few weeks and months, and however these ripple effects play out. So with that, I think we will end the webinar, but we will keep in touch with you, and please contact our staff. We are here to help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.